Hi, this is Gary Dranow from Park City, Utah, and the Gary Dranow Show, proudly broadcasting to you from Radio Evolve Rocks in Santa Barbara, California. Listen more and evolve. Hello, this is Gary Dranow with All Things Music Gary Dranow on YouTube and the Gary Dranow Show. Let me introduce to you my very special guest, Larry Dvoskin. Unlike most of my guests, I've had the opportunity to get to know Larry on a personal level a little bit. And when I say he is a beam of light in this universe of dark matter, well, over the next hour, judge for yourself. Hey, Larry, before we get into your upbringing, where you were born and all that stuff, and I'm going to say right now that I'm going to have you back on the show because there's more about you than we could possibly cover in an hour. Tell me a little bit about your life philosophy.
It's to really be of service. I may be copying Ringo a little bit, but, they tried to ask him about politics and world events. And he just said, I'm about peace, love, and music. And so I'm not fighting against anything. I'm just for using my moment in this brief, as you said, being a positive light in a dark place of so many things going on in the world. I'm using this brief time to do as much good and make a difference in the lives of others.
Well, you've already, in the short time I've known you, made a difference in my life. And I want to know where this all started. So when and where were you born?
I'm from northern New Jersey, so the suburbs. And I got to tell you, Gary, and to your listeners, there's certain places where lightning strikes. I don't know why. Obviously, Liverpool, the Beatles came out of there, periods of time, Laurel Canyon. But, New Jersey has, I don't know, maybe it's the pollution in the water or something, but you have Bowie, Bruce Springsteen, Patti Smith, Blondie, inventors like Edison. There's something weird going on in that little wrangly state. And I'm part of that thing. And I grew up, really came of age in the late 70s, listening to all the classic bands of
well,
the
hold
age.
on. We're going to get to that. Let's just stick with, we're going to go step by step through your childhood. So what was your childhood like and where exactly did you grow up?
So Dumont, New Jersey, a suburb about half hour outside of New York City. My father loved music as a listener. So he had a huge collection of Wax 78. Before vinyl, there were these thicker records that were called Wax 78. So he had the Benny Goodmans and the Duke Ellingtons and Nat King Coles, all of this great real music, and then vinyl. And so I grew up around music in the house. And there was a piano that just sat there for many years until I started taking lessons.
Well, you've just answered a couple of my questions. What exactly were your earliest music influences? Was it jazz in big bands, or did you get a cross section of music?
In what it would be in America, and for people listening overseas, 6th, 7th grade, which is, I think, around 10, 11 years old. I'm not good at that. We had Glee Club. We had classes where we sang songs like Let the Sun Shine In from Hair, which I didn't really understand until much later. Or we had dances with songs like All Right Now by Free. So I got this very gift of a time of rock that was very artistically free. And so from a young age, I had all these great influences, and there were some sparkling moments that just sort of like helped guide my fate, so to speak.
Hold on to that thought, because I had my own sparkling moment and I want to hear all about yours. Was anybody in your family a musician?
No. My brother always said he wanted to play the piano. So I just copied him and said, well, I'm going to take piano lessons. But
so he's your older brother.
Yeah, 4 years older. And we weren't really a musical family. My mom was a painter and an actress, amateur. So I really started as an actor in school plays before music.
Wow. Tell me some of the plays. Tell me some of the plays you did in this is high school or junior high school or both.
Yeah, junior high school and elementary school. In northern New Jersey, there's a local theater company called the Bergen County Players. So it's a little theater, and I acted in a anti-war drama called Summer Tree. I was in The King and I, and at sleepaway camp, I did a play that it was a one-man play, and they only gave me 2 days to learn it. And so I got on stage in front of, it was like an amphitheater with one of like those Greek, and I forgot all of the lines after about a minute or two.
Mhm.
And I just had to leave. And they're like, this guy sucks. Like they all came to see some kind of thing where so rock and roll was beckoning to me. But before rock and roll, Gary, there was rocks. And as a youth, like people collect things. I collected quartz crystals and fossils and things. I was really fascinated.
Feldspar. I bet you collected feldspar.
I have feldspar and amber and trilobites and cephalopods and all of this stuff. And then I realized you could be a lot more popular and cool in junior high school if you got into a rock band rather than collected rocks. So I went
Rocks.
to rock. I went from rock to rock.
From rocks to rock.
Yeah.
Was so your first instrument was piano?
Yes.
Okay,
I
tell me a little bit about your introduction to piano.
Well, I lied, Gary. I think I was practicing to be an entrepreneur in America or somewhere, but because my brother wanted to play piano, I told kids when I was around 10 or 11 that I played. And so we were at a party once and there was a keyboard there. And all of my friends said, okay, big shot, go play something. And suddenly I was called out and I was like, oh, well, I have a stomach ache. I got to go. And I ran home and I told my mom, I need a keyboard for Christmas holiday. And so she bought me a Farfisa, which is the same kind of almost like circusy type of sounding organ that the
Like a
Doors play.
calliope? Like a calliope?
Oh
No.
no,
Oh,
Farfisa is
okay.
like the Doors, like Light My Fire. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
specific, not a church organ. So I had a keyboard. I didn't know how to play the keyboard, but
Well,
I was
let me interrupt you just for a second. Um, I started ski racing because when I worked at Farrell's restaurant as a 14-year-old, I told this other kid who I had no idea was a national level ski racer that I ski raced. And
of course.
because I told the lie, I had to live up to the lie. And by the time I
Oh,
was in my early 20s, I was beating him. So
you know,
and his name is Blaine Loman, by the way, just so there's context to that. So
well,
you got the Farfisa, was it?
yes, Farfisa is a weird little organ because it's really only got a few sounds, but if you listen to the Doors, it's that sound. It's a very unique thing. Um, at the same time, and while there was a kind of come to the universe moment when in sixth grade, I think, these kids came into our class with acoustic guitars and they played, Hey Jude and Let It Be. And all the girls kind of swooned and all the guys were like, oh, I wish I was doing that. That's really cool. So going home, this is even before I got the keyboard, going home from class that day, I had my what I call field of dreams moment. I literally heard a voice in my head. It said, if you want to do music, you will be a success. And it was a knowing. It wasn't, just random talking to myself. It was some Monty Python like cartoon where the clouds part and God says, Larry, start being a musician. It was weird and wonderful because it felt very natural. It wasn't threatening or joyful. It was just a normal knowing And so when I got this keyboard and was called out for not actually playing, I was in the band with the kids who had come in and impressed everyone. So I went really from being just a non-musician to suddenly being in the band because I was the only person who had a keyboard.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
so sometimes it pays to just have the gear.
Let me tell you about my lightning
Yeah.
bolt moment. I was
Yeah.
driving up Ventura Boulevard with my mother in her Cadillac, and Crossroads, the live version from Cream, came on. This
Oh,
was
oh yeah.
1968. And it
Yeah.
just so happens that song was recorded on my birthday in 1968 and made its radio very quickly. So I said to my mom after I heard this, I said, Mom, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Turn the car around, take me to Ernie Ball guitars. 30 minutes later, we walked out with my 1967 Stratocaster, which I still have,
Oh,
and my Champ amp, and that started my career in music. So I totally relate to your story. When did you start writing music?
much later. At first I had to learn how to play it. So I did two things, Gary, that really helped. And I advise this for people in any form. It could be photography, it could be cooking. Find people who are better than you, nicely annoy them, and learn their secrets. So while I was taking classical lessons and getting the finger technique by playing Chopin and Bach and all of this stuff, I was also met this hippie stoner kid who played at one of our school dances, and I pestered him for his phone number and called him every day saying, I want to come and learn how to play like Leon Russell and Greg Allman and jam and play the blues. So I was learning the feeling of music from someone who taught me the blues scale, things I wouldn't find out for years. Just in one afternoon, I'd find out. And then I was also getting the physical technique to be able to really move my hands separately and play. So these two separate things, the feel and then the technique, came together. I bored my friends to death because they come over and say, dude, there's like a party tonight and we got a keg. And I'd say, no, I'm staying home and practicing. And they'd
But
be,
for music, you would have been dating, right?
so by freshman year, I was in the band playing for our freshman class reception where three separate middle schools converged. And the myth, Gary, they say every person has a myth. Mine is the ugly duckling and the swan. I went from being like a nerdy kid, not very popular, to suddenly being on stage playing all of those great songs of the 70s, and we had the horns from the marching band. So we could play like the group Chicago, and we could play all these great things. And suddenly, like, my friends were like, how did that guy get up there? He was always staying home and practicing. I guess now I know why.
Uh-huh. Uh, to this day, I still practice at least 10 to 15 hours a week, and you just gotta.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of jump ahead and then go back in a second, but you made me think of who are your biggest mentors, and we all need mentors, right?
Yes. I will reveal that I have a forthcoming book that I'm still writing and editing and talking to. I have an agent that I'm talking to various publishers, but it's called The Care and Feeding of Rock Stars. It's
Ah,
meant as a bit of humor, and that the care and feeding of dogs or parrots or my biggest rock star was my mother, Shirley Dvoskin. She taught second grade in Dumont, New Jersey for 30 years. She mentored thousands of kids. I met people who said, your mom taught me how to make it rain. We did this humidity thing, and suddenly there was water coming down. I don't know how she did it in a public school, but she supported my dreams.
okay,
And
hold your thought on your mom. Let's jump back in on her. We're going to take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Larry Dvoskin, right?
yes, and we're going to talk about John Lennon when we come back about the care and feeding of rock stars.
Okay, John Lennon, Karen Feeding and Rock Stars. Larry Dvoskin, the one and only.
This new age will we create God in the space stage under the sign of the stars, or in our byways will we go too far? You're just a number so small, a data point of light in an uploaded file. Split an atom in two, but will you let me reach inside of you? This new age will we create God in the space stage under the sign of stars, or in our byways will we go too far? Living ocean, light speed motion, thought projection, silent ocean. Living, breathing, born and dying in time and space. My mind is flying. Rise out of the pain. Rise from the physical
And we're back with Larry Dvoskin, and he is now going to talk to us about. Take it away, Larry.
Well, I was asked before the break about who my musical mentors or inspirations, I would say. And I'd have to say, if I had to pick one, it would be John Lennon. And the reason why I picked John Lennon is obvious to many people. I mean, he wrote so many incredible songs, but he used his popularity to, in the way he could at the time, make the world a better place. And he also had a kind of humor and self-effacing. You know, he wrote like lyrics like, I'm a loser. And you'd think, you know, you're one of the Beatles, you're the most popular band on earth. But it's, I've lost someone who's near to me and I'm not what I appear to be. He had a way of being both humble and grandiose at the same time, for good reason. But his music was about his own personal journey. And I had so much respect for the fact that he broke so many rules with the work that he did. And you know, he paid the price, unfortunately, in life. Like, so many people who are prophets, and he would never call himself a prophet. In fact, he wrote The Working Class Hero and other things, and Instant Karma. But he kind of gave the middle finger to people who are pretentious and like the song Revolution. He was around all these people trying to be cool or to change things, but he actually did.
Yeah, without a doubt, his influence is huge, and still is long after his death. In these plays that you were in junior high school, and did it carry on to high school as well?
Yes, it did, and
So my
they
question is, I'm sorry, my question is, were you singing?
no. I'll tell you why. For some reason, and I took voice lessons as a child, I used to sing, but around that early teen puberty voice change thing, my voice teacher said, you will really damage your vocal cords if you keep singing. So when I got into that first band I mentioned with the Farfisa organ and playing Santana songs and Doors, there'd be a mic for me to sing, and then I'd try, and then the next rehearsal, the mic would be gone and the band would all be kind of giggling and looking at each other. They'd say, just play the keyboard. Don't worry about the singing part. So it was much later that the singing came, and also another inspiration, Gary, because in later years I would find the Beach Boys in my living room, decades later, and I'm singing with them.
The actual Beach Boys?
Well, members of the group.
Yeah.
I'm Al Jardine's songwriting partner and one of his producers. So, he'd come with some of the guys and I'd be teaching them parts. And I'd think, I'm the guy who sang so bad in high school, they took the microphone away. And now I'm showing the greatest vocal band, some people consider America's band, parts. And it just shows you anything is possible in life, Gary. There's no, I couldn't play baseball. I probably couldn't ski. I'd fall down and break my leg. Like, you're a genius and you do that. But in this thing that I was passionate about, if I didn't have the natural talent, I developed it over time.
Okay. So I had asked you the question. Well, you kind of answered the question who your influences were once you hit junior high and high school. And I'm hearing the Doors. I'm hearing the Beatles. I'm hearing the great acts of the early '70s. Did you go? Were you aware of blues at all?
Yes, and the thing about the hippie stoner guy that was teaching me how to play is he taught me the blues scale and how to jam. And so, there were a lot of musicians who learn, let's say, traditional music, but if you take the sheet music away, they can't just groove. So I had both things happening at once, and I don't want to jump around time-wise, but this helped me later on. I answered an ad in the Village Voice, the New York Want ads, and did a play about Jimi Hendrix. And obviously Jimi Hendrix never had a keyboard player, but for some reason they wanted one. And I found myself jamming with Latinos and African Americans and folk people and having all of these different influences later on that helped me to just jump in and do music. And I think that's something missing today. People download tracks from some AI site and say, oh, I want a song that sounds like Drake, and then they just blah, blah, blah over the top. Like, I actually learned the Great American Songbook of rock, or I should say the Great Global Songbook of rock and blues, and then started making my own. There's a great scene in the movie Ray about Ray Charles where the person who discovered him, the founder of Atlantic Records, Ahmet Ertegun, said to Ray Charles, he said, you're great at imitating Nat King Cole or this one and that one, but who's Ray Charles? Like, you got to create your own sound. So in my teenage years, over time, I started writing songs and started developing that thing. And one of my lessons I tell people is just surround yourself with people who are better than you. It's guaranteed if they'll give you the time of day, they'll pull you up faster.
So was this hippie keyboard player one of your first mentors?
Yeah, I never thought of him, and this is the first time I'm thinking of him because he wasn't a mentor for long. Because I was walking down the street and I saw a wanted poster with his picture on it that
Uh-huh.
his dad, he wasn't wanted by the police. He just ran off with his girlfriend to Florida as a 16-year-old and was smoking pot, and his dad was like, "Where's my son?" And the police didn't help, so he was like stapling like pictures of around telephone poles around Dumont, New Jersey. And I was like, well, there goes the mentor. I guess I'm on.
Well, hopefully he's still alive today. Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He's probably grouchy too. Is my guess.
um, so when exactly did you start writing songs, music, songs?
Mid teens, and I was confused because by that time, in the mid 70s, there was a meatball of different music styles. You had the end of the classic rock era of the 60s. You had these new like chill out singer songwriters like James Taylor and Carole King were like, whoa, man, like the 60s freaked us out. We just want to chill out now. And Woodstock, I mean, Watergate and the Vietnam War ending. And then you had like these Americana bands like the Eagles and the Allman Brothers kind of coming up. And then you had people like suddenly Barry Manilow coming through. And I'm a piano player. So I was like, am I Elton John? I had the same problem that many people have, including the Ray Charles story is, am I Barry Manilow or am I Elton John? Very different. Or am I like a jam keyboard player with a New Jersey-based band that sounds like the Allman Brothers? So it was a journey, that wasn't a straight line, but a kind of windy one. But mid 70s started writing songs.
Boy, I had a question right on the tip of my tongue and it's gone. But that's that when you're 5 years older, my age, or 4 years older when you're my age, hopefully this doesn't happen to you. Um, uh, so what were the initial genres, would you say, that you wrote in, or was it just a melting pot?
It was a melting pot. And, back in the day, before before everyone said they're an influencer and a public figure online, we did a demo in high school at a local studio. I had, out of 4 songs I had, on one song, one line that I sang. And my friends, when we graduated high school, we went, to California, and we called record companies from a payphone, just looked in a phone book and called. And most people, the secretary was like, go away. But one person at what was then Elektra Records, which was part of David Geffen's thing, Elektra
Just
Asylum.
a point of interest, I've got the world's largest collection of Elektra guitars. Anyways,
Wow.
Continue.
So this woman just said, oh, you kids are here from, you're teenagers, you're here, like, come into the office. And we went into this record company. It was like going to like Mount Olympus or something, and gold records and cool people. And we played our tape for this person, and it sounded amazing. And this woman was she was so encouraging. She's like, you guys, I want to follow you. I want to hear you develop. And one of the people who was not there, this girl who was the main singer of our high school band, she was a great singer, but the woman sat there totally bored. And then my one little line and one song came up, and it was just literally, if you go, then you'll know about it anyway. That was it. Not very melodic. But she jumped up and she said, that's it. She stopped the tape. Like, that's it. And I thought that means like, you guys suck, get out. And instead she, who's that guy? Who's singing? And everyone looked at me like, the guy who can't sing is that. And she said, that person has an original sound. The other sounds sound like anyone I hear. Nothing. That person should be singing more. And in that moment, inside me, a singer was born. Not with a big ability, not with a Freddie Mercury, but more with a Paul Simon or a Bob Dylan, somebody who just had a feeling, and the feeling carried over into the soul of another person.
So you had one of those immediately recognizable voices, which I think is more important than a technically good singer. So,
well, and over the years I got better, but it was, sometimes we need just someone to come along and affirm us, Gary, and
well,
listeners.
and you're carrying that forward, aren't you?
I'm carrying it forward in you know there's a saying, you never want to do what your parents did, and there's also a saying, who those who can't make it teach the thing that they can't make. So I never wanted to be a music teacher, but I found myself in later years through the ups and downs, and I'm jumping ahead and we'll jump back, but I found myself teaching a songwriting course at New York University, not for the college age, but for the adults, continuing ed. And there were all these people who were accountants or lawyers and managers, and they had these great song ideas, but they knew they had to, like, become an adult and make a living and raise kids and pay for the college. And then after they were done, they don't want to die with the music inside them, so they'd find me and they'd take the class and then sometimes hire me afterward to help sculpt and make their music into something. And it's
so you were New York University adjunct professor from 1997 to 2017. So that's a 10-year run, and the rock and roll fantasy camp.
Yeah.
20 years.
20
Yeah.
20 years.
Wow.
And at first I was like, oh, I'm a loser, poor me. And then I realized, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And I met the most incredible people. I formed friendships with people you would never imagine a million years meeting. And sometimes, this is something in my class that I start with, Gary, and I'm saying this to listeners. In every other field of endeavor, law, medicine, sports, the level of practice and preparation and all of this stuff is so high. You have to do so much work to get to a level of excellence. But in songwriting, it was a singing waiter on the Lower East Side of Manhattan who then wrote, Give My Regards to Broadway, White Christmas, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy named Irving Berlin. It was a house that wrote Happy Birthday. And it was a sea captain from London who was a slave trader a couple of centuries ago, who suddenly had an epiphany and realized, like, these are humans, they're not cargo, and wrote Amazing Grace. So the thing about songwriting is you don't have to have an MBA. You don't have to. It's good to go study. Everybody's different, but it's one of those things that it's like teaching someone to dream in color. Like, everybody's different and everyone has a unique way of doing it.
You just exposed that you are a music historian, aren't you?
Hardly. I know real historians. I just have a passion for learning and curiosity. So I'm in the same decade of life as you are, and I feel like there's a saying in Buddhism, the Buddhist mind, the cup, like here's my iced tea, and this is not like Guinness or something, it's iced tea, but is this half full or half empty? And that is the philosophical question of life. I'm always learning and curious and filling up my cup with new learning and meeting new people like yourself that we've become friends very recently. And I love it. And it keeps you young and it keeps you more healthy, I think.
I'm so thrilled that you call me a friend already. But I found a friendship with you almost instantly. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about. So your first band was the one with the organ, or what was your first successful band, or what you would consider successful band?
Yes, there was a band in the late 70s called Fandango. Just like Yeah, just like the movie ticket site, and there was a ZZ Top album by the same name.
Mhm.
Were local they were a local band that was terrific. I mean, they could do, the Eagles, they could do the second side of Abbey Road with all those different songs as good as the album and the artist. And I knew them for years. So they got a record deal. I was maybe 18 at the time, maybe 19, I'm forgetting, but in the late 70s, they were doing a record, and the record company said, it's sort of like the same Ringo Pete Best story. They said, you need a better drummer, really, and you need a better keyboard player. And I knew their songs. And it was another Fields of Dreams moment. They were auditioning keyboard players, and I knew that I would get the gig before I even went to audition. And I wish I still had that power now. I could go play the Mega Millions, but I just knew their songs. So I learned them ahead of time. And then I added little elements, a little synthesizer here, a little piano there. So when I walked in, I was a colleague because I had played also locally in different things with my band, but I knew their material. And I just walked in, and 2 weeks later, I'm on a plane to LA, and a limo's picking us up, and we're going to the Riot House and playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go, like instant change overnight. And it was at a time, Gary, when the record companies
I mean, weren't those the days? Weren't those the days?
That, the record companies were sugar daddies. They're like, here's money to live, here's money for rent, just play music. We're going to put you on the road until a song emerges from the radio and becomes a hit. And in those days, we wouldn't have half the people who are beloved if they had to have a hit in 5 minutes like they do now. It took Peter Frampton to get Frampton Comes Alive for the world to really know his solo work.
We're going to take another 2-minute break. When we come back, I want to talk about you and your arranging skills. And heck, we could talk about Peter Frampton's guitar playing. By the way, he was also an endorser of electric guitars, just so you know, and I've got 2 of his. Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute break. We'll be back with Larry Dvoskin. This is the Gary Dranow Show with, say it for me, Larry Dvoskin.
Dvoskin. And just for listeners, I am the only Larry Dvoskin on the internet for some strange reason. So you can follow me everywhere, but we'll talk about that at the end.
But what am I?
And in a rare moment for everyone. So go play the lottery today. You're talking to Gary Dranow, who, if I'm pronouncing that right, or Dranow,
It's like
who,
Liquid Plumber, just like Liquid Plumber.
well, he also is the only Gary Dranow or Dranow on the,
Drano, yep.
and I am the only Larry Dvoskin. So how rare is it that you have two people who are the only ones out of billions of people on the planet? This is a special conversation we're having.
We're brothers from different mothers. That's the way it is.
I'm grateful. I want to say, whether it's, too early in the show, but I can't tell you, Gary, how grateful I am to know you, to become your friend, to be sharing these stories that hopefully entertain and inspire listeners many years from now, or when it first goes live. It's an honor to be here.
Well, you're welcome, and more than an honor to have you. When did you start arranging music?
In the same time, I'm a student of watching people, as I mentioned, better than me. So in that band I mentioned, Fandango, we were suddenly making albums for RCA Records, opening for people like Tom Petty or the Outlaws, Dave Mason. I mean, just people who I used to, a few years earlier, be in cover bands covering their music. Suddenly, you're backstage hanging out with them and, just small talking and or maybe even jamming with them. And so I started arranging somewhere in the late teens, and my classical training helped a lot because I learned about voicings of chords. I learned about arrangements, and having been in cover bands really helped me in becoming an original artist because I saw what other bands did and I was able to take the best of that and make it my own.
Which I can't even impress upon my listeners what the gem he just gave you is. Make it your own. Don't copy. Make it your own. Except for when you're playing cover bands. How did you get your foot in the door with producing?
It was by honestly, Gary, it was by default. As good as that band Fandango that I mentioned in my late teens was live, we were amazing. I mean, when you're opening for a band, like there was a group back in the day, you had all these groups like Leonard Skinner, these Southern bands. We opened for the Outlaws. And when you're standing on a stage and you look out to a sea of cowboy hats and people holding up bottles of Jack Daniels saying rock and roll, you have to bring it. And we had 3 guitars. So I was just in that band, listening, watching, doing everything. And just by osmosis, again, being around people better than me, learned all of these different skills. Here's something that I want to give everyone in the middle of the show, a sort of pop trick 101, in creating popular music. Start with the chorus. Don't bore us. Start with the chorus, The Beatles, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Boom, 3 seconds, you're in the chorus. Same thing, Nile Rodgers, who's produced, he was in Chic and he produced David Bowie. And
I've got one of his guitars.
His thing is like, it's one of his things, freak out.
I'm getting lucky tonight. 1,000 times.
Yeah, don't bore us. Get to the chorus, especially in this day and age where the average attention span is a few seconds and people are TikToking and Instagram reelsing. Like, this is a Pop Secret 101. Try taking some of your songs and starting with the chorus.
Well, not all. I never have. I'm going to start doing that right away.
Yeah, because otherwise people listen for 10, 20 seconds. They're like, next song. So it's a secret, not for everyone. The which we'll get to in a little bit. The single cover behind you, This New Age, is the opposite of that, but it's intended to be a very different piece of artistic work. But especially when you're new and starting out, the more you can jump right in, in the cases where that's important and you have a good hook, that's another distinction. Don't bore us, start with the chorus.
Love it. Love it. Let's talk about New Age for a bit.
Yeah.
What does this song mean to you? How long did it take you to come up with it? Who are the people who are playing on it with you? Just tell me the whole story about New Age.
Well, thank you so much for everyone listening, watching. This New Age is a song that I wrote around 1984 in Munich, Germany. And at the time, there was David Bowie did a song called 1984. George Orwell wrote a book. Everyone was thinking, oh my God, the world is going to be taken over by technology and robots, and we're all going to be just these minions and slaves. And so I wrote a song that was not preachy, but was pondering mankind. Are we headed toward, the new age and enlightenment and togetherness, or are we slowly like going to go extinct because of our choices of how we're hurting the planet or whatever? So we were at a crossroads, and I wrote it, put it away, and it was just such a unique song influenced by Yes and Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and all this. And then maybe 2 or 3 years ago, around 2023, my engineer was taking old cassettes and making them MP3s and digitizing. And out of hundreds, he said, Larry, this song that you have, this New Age, I'm gonna stop working with you unless you allow us, me and you, to record this. This is a very special song. And I finished it. Sorry for the long story, but I've moved to LA from New York 2 years ago, and I came upon this band called Familiar Faces. They were in college at the time. They just graduated here in 2025 in June.
Was this the band that was just recently in Park City?
Yes, and
I missed.
Yeah. Yeah, and they rocked, and I was in a different part of this venue, and through the wall I just heard this sound. I'm like, the singing is great, the playing is great. Who are these guys? And so they reminded me of T-Rex, Mark Bolan, Mott the Hoople. They had a glam thing, but they were really good at playing and singing. And we became friends. So
did you take them under your wing? Did you become a mentor?
So, well, we just became friends. I started just going to their shows in LA. They're doing the traditional thing of just playing in clubs, mostly originals, but also playing, covers in other places like the Disney Walk or something. So I had this New Age recorded, and I did it in New York, and the band heard it. And it was up their alley of this prog rock 70s, Zeppelin, Yes, Rush sound. And they recorded it at home. They finished, they only got halfway through, and then they got busy doing something else. And when they sent me a rough, I thought, this is terrific. And, there is a trend right now of people like Elton John being with Brandi Carlile, or how Tony Bennett would duet with Lady Gaga or someone, like these different generational things. So I had them sing the first half and play some acoustic guitars, and then I jump in the middle and finish the song. And you can't really tell the difference unless you're listening for it, because they made their voices sound similar. And the reaction that I'm getting is, Gary, is humbling, because people who I really value and respect are saying things to me that, it would be really, uncool to be boastful. But I mean, I've had people compare it to Dream On by Aerosmith or Stairway to Heaven. I have a friend who's an engineer who's worked with Beck and Jay-Z and Nine Inch Nails, and his thing was using the F-bomb word I won't use here, but he just said, holy F, this is epic. And that means more to me than anything. I'd love it to become some kind of accidental hit, but we're channels, we're the conduit for something. The music of the sphere is the divine. And so my job
has it been released yet?
Yes, it's out. This New Age, Larry Dvoskin, similar to Gary, is the only Larry Dvoskin, the only Gary Dranow. And it's on every platform that you can go to. And you can even buy it, on iTunes and Amazon. And the only reason why I say that is I won't get rich from 99 cents, but it charts faster with sales more than streams. So
Of course. Let's talk about the evil thing in the room, Spotify. What is
yes.
your take on Spotify and the music industry?
Well, before my time, maybe before your time, when the music of the 50s of Lawrence Welk and the Shirelles and the Marvelettes and Elvis suddenly transitioned into the early 60s, and you had the Rolling Stones and Cream. There were generations of people said, oh my God, music is dead. This is noise. This isn't music. And so each generation grabs onto what it feels speaks to them, to their age group, to their milieu is the word. And so I don't really have an opinion for or against Spotify or the music business now, because I just flow like water downstream. If I get stuck behind a
You
log
you and Bruce Lee.
I just flow, because what am I going to do? What I do like is that, you know, the internet, as everyone knows, is a Pandora's box. There's every good and evil in one place, in one thing. And I can just go on, take a song. I could just go blah, 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 put it up on one of these digital record companies for almost no money. And the next day it's global, and it's on Spotify and Apple and Deezer and Tidal and this thing and iTunes and Amazon. So that is a miracle, because up until now.
So how does an indie musician transition from being an indie musician where their lives revolve around Spotify to making it to any degree in the music business?
I would say what I've noticed, and I'm stepping outside my role as interview subject to say to people listening, your music, Gary, that's on all of these platforms, which is great in my humble opinion, like fantastic. People, please follow Gary's music and like it and share it.
Thank you, Larry.
But there is no one path. I'll tell you, there's a guy who has just been voted, I think, the BBC Artist of the Year, named Teddy Swims. He also was up for Grammy Best New Artist. And what he did is he did YouTube videos pretty regularly where he would sing cover songs. He could sing, a Sam Cooke or a James Brown song, because he's got this huge, throaty, husky voice. But then he'd also sing a Celine Dion ballad that you'd expect to hear at somebody's wedding, and make it sound great. And by just being so good and being consistent, he developed a following on YouTube where people were just really loving the quality of his work and his voice. And before long, the record companies, in this case, Warner Brothers, came, knocking on his door saying, you're terrifically talented and people are finding you. So there is no one way, but I have to say a steady drip online is vital. And what I've learned, and I could screen share.
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
I had a manager before you who did grievous harm to my career. And when I met her, I was releasing one song a week. And she says, too much. No one can handle it. I want you to release one song a month. And I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll do every other week. And she said, but no songs for 3 months. I have now been 37 days since I released a song, and my Spotify numbers are tanking because the trip ain't there. So I'm getting right. Steady drip. I'm getting back to it. We're going to take our last break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about Larry's overview of his career and some of his select music credits, and we're going to let him take it out with that. and we'll be right back in 2 minutes.
The Nipsey Gypsy thought it was hip. She abandoned ship, she couldn't swim. The roly-poly prayed to the holy guacamole god named Jim. I feel like I'm living in a Salvador Dali painting. I feel like a Fellini star in a movie that's gone too far. Yes, life is strange, life is strange, life is strange, life is strange. The cock star, rock star looked like a lobster with a rooster's head and fish nose beak. The Gucci Poochie Ruchi's changed her sex so she'd look chic. I feel like I'm living in a Salvador Dali painting. I feel like a Fellini star in a movie that's gone too far. Yes, life is strange, life is strange, life is strange, life is strange. All day long they dress in their normal suits, pretending they are sane. But when they're alone, they think naughty thoughts like vulgar insects in their brain.
All right, now we're going to close up shop. We're going to talk a little bit about Larry's career. He is a multi-Grammy nominated musician, songwriter, music producer. He is also a #1 Amazon Books author, thought leader and consultant for Silicon Valley startups, and as we already discussed, former NYU professor of music. Larry, is there anything you want to add to that incredible CV?
Yeah, I want to say that's a lot. I'm exhausted just hearing it, let alone doing it. But they're all, they're all branches of the same tree, which is being creative, being curious, and giving back to others. And I'm growing every day. I soon to be another book author, soon to be podcasting myself to tell, some of the stories before I forget them. I'm getting older here, Gary.
So, yeah, don't tell me about getting older. You have to agree right now that you'll be back on because we have so much to talk about.
Absolutely.
And
even get into the story of Queen in that hotel room with the midgets,
Okay.
But that's for another podcast.
For our next one.
Yes, I'm just kidding, of course. There was no there were hotel rooms, and I invoke the client attorney privilege of not saying what I saw my attorney do.
Okay. As a musician, Larry has played keyboards on tour, opening for or alongside Queen, Heart, Tom Petty, Mick Fleetwood, Pat Monahan, Lewis Nelson, Richie Sambora, and others.
Yeah, there's the others. It's just funny the places you'll go. And again, what we talked about with someone who wants to be known and putting music up on Spotify and thinking, oh, it'll never be me. There's 100,000 songs a day. I became friendly with Al Jardine, one of the last living co-founders of the Beach Boys in the early 90s. And, he told me that when the Beach Boys started in the early 60s, there were about 1,000 songs a week that were released publicly and about 10 new songs that made it onto the radio. So everybody told him, this will never work. Like, who are you? There's 1,000 songs. You're not going to be one of the 10. And plus the name is stupid and you guys can't sing, and a year later they were number one and signed to Capitol Records. So
the lesson is
as cliche and horribly cliche is doing what you love, being passionate about it, and forming community. That's another big thing. This doesn't happen in a bubble. Like, if you want to survive, you got to build your hive. You've got to be around people who are rowing in the same direction, because they'll lift you up. And if you hear all these stories about, before my time, I heard about Laurel Canyon. It's a block from here where, Joni Mitchell would finish a song.
Ladies of the Canyon.
She'd run over and go to Jim Morrison's house and say, hey, what do you think of this? And then Jim would have David Crosby stop by, and then they'd all go visit Brian Wilson, and they all graduated together. So if you're out there by yourself somewhere, at least, get into chat rooms, get into events, go to things that are happening. I mean, literally during Grammy week in LA, you could sit in the restaurant of any one of the big hotels and see half the music business and just bump into people. And even if it's just a kind word, like, this song influenced me, this performance influenced me, more often than not, people are like, here's my Instagram, or follow me, or let me follow you. Like people are what make the success happen, not just
all right.
the money.
So what I'm hearing is network, ladies and gentlemen. And with this, we're going to conclude the first podcast with Larry Dvoskin and his pearls of wisdom that just keep flowing. And he will be back on my show. You could mark my words on it. Larry, it's been a pleasure and an honor. I'm so glad you came on my show, and I look to have you back.
Yes, well, thank you. And I will be talking to you a lot this week. So thank you for this opportunity. And for everybody listening, it's a simple thing. If I could do it, so can you. And we're not above you. We're all water in the same ocean. We're all equal in the eyes of the universe,
including dark matter. Okay, with that, we're out.